Go ahead and turn it over to Virginia Holman, who is the president of the Island Wildlife Chapter, a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation.
Hello, I'm Virginia. We're here today with our three esteemed panelists to discuss and take your questions about the film Burned, Are Trees the New Coal?, about the wood pellet industry in the Southeast. I hope each of you had an opportunity to view the film, and if not, I hope you'll please stay for today's talk, and we'll make sure that you can access it after this afternoon's events. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists. John Taggart, who is on the phone with us. He is a professor of environmental science at UNC Wilmington. Belinda Joyner is with Clean Water for North Carolina and is a community activist. And Heather Hilliker is a staff attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. And Heather, before we begin, I wonder if you might give us an overview of the film and the wood pellet issue at play.
Of course. Thanks, Virginia, and thank you for having me here today. So Burned, Are the Trees the New Coal? Is a documentary that actually came out a couple years ago. I think it might have been 2018. But the story that's being told in this film is very much still going on today, and if anything, is getting worse. So the quick synopsis just from the website is that Burned tells the little-known story of the accelerating destruction of our forests for fuel and probes the policy loopholes, huge subsidies, and blatant greenwashing of the burgeoning biomass electric power industry. So basically what this film shows is what started with European attempts to actually address climate change and reduce carbon emissions. And they, at one point, about 20 years ago or so, they believed that switching to burning wood pellets or biomass would actually be a climate change solution. And so they heavily subsidized the industry as a renewable energy technology and a carbon reduction technology. However, over the course of the last 20 years, it has become increasingly more obvious that burning wood for energy actually increases carbon pollution in the short term and has other very problematic impacts, including biodiversity impacts to the area in the Southeast United States, including North Carolina, where much of the wood pellets and trees are being harvested from, as well as impacts to local communities in the form of air pollution, dust, and noise. And so all of these issues are addressed in the film, and I think all three of us, the panelists, are happy to discuss them in more detail.
Thank you so much. That's great. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation and its chapters are concerned with wildlife and wildlife habitats in our state, and we know that what's good for wildlife is by extension good for humans. I found this film startling in so many ways, and let's start with biodiversity, which Heather just mentioned. The Cape Fear region of North Carolina is one of the most biodiverse regions in the country. We host plants and animals that exist nowhere else in the world, like the federally endangered Venus flytrap. And according to William Mumaw of Tufts University, who was in the long version of the film, was he in the short version of the film as well? There's so many versions, I don't know who's watched which version. This is a quote from him: "The most disturbed forests in the world are in the United States, not the Amazon and not Indonesia." He writes, "I don't wish to lessen the significance of the Amazon in Indonesia, but the loss of forest canopy is the greatest in the southeastern United States of any place on the planet." And that's really sobering. And I wonder, John, if you can start us off and talk about the ecological impacts in North Carolina, particularly the eastern part of the state.
Sure. One thing to bear in mind, if you look at a map of North Carolina, especially wetlands, over 95% of the wetlands in North Carolina are east of I-95. And so you have a lot of habitats for species that aren't found much elsewhere. Of course, this continues on in adjacent states. The red cockaded woodpecker is one example. That used to be found throughout the state at one time, and now it's restricted to isolated areas, mostly in the coastal plain, because of stands of longleaf pine. And as well, Virginia mentioned the Venus flytrap. And sort of in overall perspective, you know, our coastal plain is part of an internationally significant biological area because of the combination of high biodiversity, endemic species, and the potential for habitat loss by land use changes and consumptive uses. And we have a relatively small percentage of protected areas, such as the Green Swamp Preserve, state parks, holly shelter game land, but these are highly dependent on adjacent public and private multiple use lands to provide adequate ecological support and wildlife corridors, which is extremely important to maintain this biodiversity. But as was mentioned, incentives for increased removal of forested areas for wood pellets, and this is on top of pulpwood and saw timber, makes the prospect of future biodiversity maintenance a highly problematic question. Now, to refer to the film, the very first scene, you had Jeff Turner from Tidewater, Virginia, out at a site that was being harvested, and you got to actually see it going on with the heavy equipment, the feller bunchers and skidders and so forth, cutting whole trees and taking them out of there, and you saw the before and the after. And what you had afterward was sort of a desolate landscape of stumps and most likely a successional sequence of grasses and forbs. Who knows what'll come in there, maybe eventually some shrubs like wax myrtle or silverling. And because of the compaction and alteration of the site, you're not going to get the same composition that you had before. You most likely would get maybe red maple, sweet gum, that kind of thing. You're not going to get the prothonotary warblers. You're not going to get pileated woodpeckers. This is a wholesale change. And one of the realities of NVIVA's policies, if you read them, they say, we want the landowners, it's largely private landowners that are putting up their land for sale, we want them to replant. They don't have to. There's no legal obligation to do that. But if they do, most likely they will alter the land considerably for pine plantation. I mean, they're not going to run out there and plant swamp black gum and cypress. They'll plant loblolly pine. But to do that, they have to further alter the land by bedding, ditching, and that sort of thing. And then that leads to the scene where you had Dr. Alan Weekly, who is the curator of the UNC Herbarium, talking about the characteristics of pine plantations. And they are essentially a sterile monoculture of trees. The understory is usually largely pine straw, and sometimes that's harvested and sold as well. And you have a few plants that come in there, but of course that's actively discouraged because they want to have the trees growing as straight and tall and as marketable as possible. So with the wood pellet industry, you're going to have more and more of this unfortunate quilt of areas that are either going into funny old fields and who knows what succession, or pine plantations, and you're losing the natural biodiversity of the previously relatively untouched lowland hardwood forests. Now, you know, NVIVA is kind of shifting their narrative and saying, well, we're starting to take it from pine plantations and so forth. But again, that drives even more consumption because if you show that, they have that map that shows the constellation of pellet mills in the southeast. This becomes like a Ponzi scheme in a way. You have to have more and more and more to keep it going. And our population's not decreasing. So unfortunately, if politicians allow this to go on, then there's going to be more consumption of land and more negative impacts on biodiversity. It's an unfortunate cascading event, and it really has to be stopped now. I think one of the realities of it, when we had a wood pellet forum here at UNCW in 2018 and had about over 150 people, people were just kind of stunned by this. They hadn't heard of it, even though they live right in the very city where the pellets are exported. And it's because the consumption of these sites is done on private property, private negotiations. They're trucked to a mill in a rural area where they're processed. Then a big truck comes down here, takes them to the mill, and they put them on a big ship, and away it goes to Europe. So it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind and not as a parent. And that's why we need people to be so aware of this and the destruction that's going on. But in particular, folks who are concerned about wildlife and biodiversity have got to be very worried. And this is spreading like a cancer because we're in the Southeast. I've attended a online meeting about people in Vermont who are worried about it on public forests up there. And also there is a growing wood pellet industry on the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, where the market is Asia. It is Japan and South Korea. So, and Lord knows what's going to happen if you get China wanting it. This is really a concern, and we are functioning, I feel, like a colony for Europe. We're consuming our resources, send them over there and burn them. And it really is tragic, but particularly for biodiversity. So I'll kind of leave off there, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into it.
It's really useful. And Heather has posted a wood pellet map with the biodiversity hotspot in the chat for everyone to see. One thing that might be useful for some people in our audience is just understanding, why does biodiversity matter? Why is it important to humans?
Well, you have what's called a food web. You have a complete constellation of species that are really interdependent on each other. And if you start losing links in that food web, sorry, I don't have one to illustrate it, you can have really catastrophic consequences for humanity. And with so much of the land being consumed for human uses, in particular, you have to be concerned about what's called ecosystem services. That is, in this case, of course, sequestration of carbon, because the carbon dioxide is going up. We know that from the Mauna Loa volcano observatory, over 400 parts per million now consistently in a staircase kind of thing. But also locally, you can't artificially produce good, clean air on the volume that's needed to maintain our state, our country, our earth, as well water quality too. And all of these species are interrelated with the environment to allow that to happen. And so, you get people who are upset about the Endangered Species Act and so forth, but these species are there for a reason. They evolved to occupy specific niches. And so we don't know all there is to know about science. We have to claim that and understand that we need to have it around in order to really survive and appreciate it. So biodiversity is really one of the main underpinnings of our successful existence on this earth.
Terrific, thank you. Well, let's talk about carbon since you brought it up. So maybe one of you would like to give a quick primer on how trees and also how wetlands function as carbon sinks and what that means, why it matters.
Well, however, the importance of trees with photosynthesis, they are able to take in carbon dioxide and then give off oxygen, and that has been obviously an important thing for maintaining the budget of CO2 in the atmosphere. But now that we are taking carbon that is fossil fuel and other sources like wood and burning it and overloading the atmosphere with it, you have a decreasing base of forest that is there to absorb it. And as you do that, then you can have to worry about more CO2, which is a greenhouse gas. It absorbs, maintains heat by way of its bonding. So the more CO2 molecules you have, the more heat that is going to be retained. And that's why we see the trend in rising temperatures that we have. That's why we see right at this second the terrible wildfires that you have out west, and also the sea level rise, a whole series of cascading events. This is integrally related to carbon dioxide levels, because that's the main greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And as we release more and more of it in whatever form, things are going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And the real tool for sequestering carbon and getting those levels of carbon dioxide down is keeping forests, what's called proforestation, having forests available to sequester the carbon, and old growth forests in particular, not 15-year-old pine plantations. We need to have that. It really is important. And then, of course, associated with that are all the plants and animals. But it's urgent that within the next 30 or 40-year time frame that sequestration is taken as a serious issue. And my personal feeling is, frankly, the subsidies that are paid ought to be paid to people to grow trees, to just keep their land the way it is. Subsidize them to do that. And now you're talking. Then you're going to do something positive.
And I'll just add on to the point that John is making, specifically as it relates to the biomass industry, and just underline a point that is made in a documentary, which is that burning trees actually emits more CO2 per unit of energy generated than coal. It's less efficient than coal. You've got to burn more trees to get the same amount of energy as coal. So when you're talking about, burning wood, burning trees, you've got this instantaneous pulse of carbon to the atmosphere, which is actually more than burning coal. Now, when decision makers were talking about, the original renewable energy directive in the European Union and different subsidy and renewable energy schemes, and when they were talking about biomass, the idea was, okay, well, trees regrow, and trees sequester carbon as they regrow. So of course, trees are a renewable energy, and you will reabsorb the carbon that's emitted when you burn it. The problem is the time scale. That's really what the emphasis needs to be. It's that instantaneous pulse of carbon when you cut down and burn a tree, and that carbon is not sequestered, assuming the trees are replanted and regrown in some way. It takes a long period of time before you sequester the amount of carbon that was in that forest and that would have been stored and sequestered had you not cut down that tree. And that time period is anywhere from 30 to 40 years to 100 years, depending upon the type of trees that you're using, the type of feedstock materials, as the industry calls it, and the types of sourcing practices. So when you're talking about in vivo sourcing in North Carolina and Virginia, we know that a lot of that wood is coming from clear cutting of lowland, bottomland hardwood forests and use of whole trees, a lot of which are larger diameter whole trees. In that scenario, you are closer to the 80 to 100 year time period before you get back to what is referred to as a period of carbon neutrality. So that's, I guess, probably just a point to kind of underlie what we're talking about here, where I think it really just shows, in my opinion, the ridiculousness of the biomass and wood pellet industry to receive subsidies as a renewable energy and carbon reduction methodology when you're not actually getting any carbon benefit. In fact, it's worse for the carbon in the short and medium term, which is the exact time period that we need to be drastically reducing emissions.
We have a couple of questions from Chris. And she is asking, or he is asking, they're asking, are we going to create our own problem by needing to use wood for building and fuel? Did we not have civilizations collapse in the past because of this? Anyone?
It gets into kind of a different area. Certainly, there's always going to be a demand for, lumber and paper. How that's done, I have to say I'm not real knowledgeable about that in terms of recycling and so forth. But I mean, it's a good point. There's always going to have to be some consumption, but wood pellets is just something on top of it, and makes it even worse in a very, very unfortunate way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak to the pros and cons of using wood in, say, construction or other things. What I will say is that some uses of wood will store the carbon for a longer period of time, vis-a-vis bioenergy, which again is that instantaneous release of carbon. And as John just said, it is adding one more thing on top of on top of the existing wood products industry, and something that is genuinely not helping. It's being used as a way to reduce carbon, but it's not actually doing that. So it's that kind of perverse incentive issue that's going on here.
I'd like to pivot a little bit, and it was interesting when we were talking just at the beginning or before the video started. John was saying that this sometimes is almost an out of sight industry, that it occurs in counties away from the coast, and these wood pellets are put in silos and then shipped out, so nobody sees it. But that's not exactly true. That's a very kind of privileged position to have in a lot of ways. So there are communities where this isn't out of sight at all, and I'm wondering if Belinda might be able to weigh in on that a little bit for our audience. Belinda?
What was the question again? I'm sorry, Virginia.
We were talking about the impact to communities that have wood pellet plants and that are experiencing sort of rapid large-scale forest loss.
Yes, Northampton County, everywhere you look now is trees that have been cut down. We do have a paper mill here. We do have a plant and seaboard that also uses trees along with Enviva. So when you put the three together, basically, if things keep going like they're going, I would say in the next year or so, we might not even have forest, period. Here in Northampton County, we have a population of a little over 20,000 people, 58% African-American, 41% white, 2.1% Hispanics, 1.2 Native Americans, and we have 25% of our people live in the poverty level. And with Enviva being here, it has, to me, reaped great havoc on the community. They had an article in the paper, News and Observer, saying that, they've gotten generic reports of noise and, so forth and so on. But when we look at the health hazards here in Northampton County, you're talking about asthma, respiratory issues, cardiovascular diseases, low birth weight, cancer, exposure to the particulates, which is VOC, those chemicals that come from Enviva. Those are the health impacts that people have to deal with each and every day. And when you're talking about your daily living, just your daily living, you're unable to, you're not able to spend time outside like you normally would. We visited a lady's home that lives, like, Enviva's right in her backyard, and she used to have a beautiful flower garden, and she says, she doesn't go out now and work in her garden as much as she used to because her nose would run. And, it's in other words, it has made some people prisoners in their own homes where they cannot go out and just enjoy the everyday living. One gentleman that lives right in front of Enviva, where you turn to go there, he said his wife and son has asthma, and they might go outside for 5 or 10 minutes or so, and then they're back in the house because of the breathing. And then to add insult to injury, we are a Tier 1 county, meaning that we are one of the poorest counties in the state of North Carolina. But yet and still, since Enviva came here and our past commissioners were so anxious, I guess, to say that they did something, they gave them an incentive to come here. And the incentive that they gave them to come here has made our property taxes go up to 6%. You're talking about a Tier 1 county where you have elderly people that are on fixed incomes, that's making a decision sometime to maybe buy medicine or pay a bill. And then you're talking about your property taxes is increased to 6%. We have the 3rd largest tax rate in the state of North Carolina. And like I say, we're a Tier 1 county. So you're looking at places like Raleigh, Durham, and different places where the property taxes might be higher, but then you're looking at a Tier 1 county that's got a tax rate of 6% and being the 3rd largest in the state. That's a burden on the citizens itself. But that's a high rate for property taxes. But this is what our former county commissioners gave Enviva to come here to North Carolina, part of their incentive, and it has made the taxes go up. So not only are we suffering from the dust, the 24-hour noise. But now you're looking at, you're affected health-wise, and you're also affected in your income because, if you have a decent piece of property and you think your tax rate is 6%, that's a lot of money. And then having a volunteer fire department, I'm just thinking in the event that we would have a major fire at Enviva, and we have a volunteer fire department. And just say, for instance, if this fire happening at, let's say 12 o'clock at night, the average person is at home in their bed sleep. So you get a call, okay, that there's a fire at Enviva. You have to get up, get dressed, go to the fire department, suit up, and then proceed to wherever the fire is. You've lost almost an hour's time. And if this is a major fire, then, what impact is it going to have on the community? Enviva is sitting like right dab in the middle of a community of people that look like me. They're in their front yards, they're on the side, they're in their back. And then they talk about they gave this to the school or they gave that to the school. But my question to Enviva, if little Johnny gets sick from asthma or little Susie get asthma, is Enviva going to pay their hospital bills? If we're breathing this chemical in and we get cancer, are they going to pay our hospital bills? They just, in 2019, we had a public hearing where they are spending $45 million to expand. We just had, they just applied for a renewal of their Title V permit. We had a public hearing on that. And of course, everything is virtual. And we had so many people singing their praises. But I'd say Ezel, because Ezel is one of those companies that take those pellets down to Chesapeake, Virginia to be shipped over the ocean. They're great people. Our Chamber of Commerce gave them the Employee of the Year award because they help with their frontline workers. And like I said, I have no problem with that because, our frontline people are very important to us. Without them, we couldn't make it. But what are they doing for the community that's directly impacted by them? What are they doing with those people that live in their front yards and their backyards of Enviva? And you got a mountain of sawdust, you got a mountain of logs, you got, like I say, trucks 24/7. What are they doing for those people? So my thing is, and they, like I said, they had a little sketch in the News and Observer where, they just get generic people. And I guess they're speaking of me and a few more that's pushing the issue. And I just feel like some people are afraid to speak. I don't know why, and we do have this, and, I don't push anybody to come that don't feel comfortable coming. And that's why I feel like, I have to be a voice. Me and some more have to be a voice for our community because somebody have to say it and be that voice. We have a lot of elderly people that, affected and they can't come out. And now with COVID and not having meetings, and if you notice, they keep saying that African Americans and Hispanics, we have a high rate of COVID. But when you look at the things that are put in our communities, then how can we not have it? Underlying conditions for we are breathing stuff that we shouldn't be breathing. Not being able to sleep at night. That's a health issue. So. It's a lot of things that come with it, but I would say this, CNN was here not too long ago, and I think they did an awesome article on that. We also had a rally in May in Raleigh, where's Cooper, because DEQ, DAQ, they do these permits with, I feel like the lack of consideration of the people that's being directly affected by it. You can say it's all right in my community, but you're not living here, so you don't have to endure what we're enduring. And when it's not in your community, it's easy to give it to somebody else. So with DEQ, DAQ, I had a meeting last year with Secretary Regan before he went to Washington. I had 3 members from DEQ, 4 members from the DEQ Advisory, Environmental Justice Advisory Board right here in my home. We took them out on a tour. They talked to the people in the community. When we met last year in March, just before the pandemic hit, no, it was in February. My question to Secretary Regan and his crew was, with all the opposition at the hearing in 2019, why were they given a permit to expand? And I was told that as long as they were in compliance with what the state said that they should be, then they had to grant them that permit. So my next question was, then if that be the case, why have a public hearing? And I was told that that would help strengthen, they would look at the comments from the public hearing and that would help strengthen the permitting laws. So my next question was, well, when are you all going to start implementing the cumulative impacts from people that are directly impacted? When are you going to start using it? I mean, to me, it's a waste of time to have a public hearing if nothing's going to be done about what's being said about the people. I can better tell my story than you can if I'm living it every day. You can't come and tell my story when you live 50, 60, 100 miles away. So, I just feel like it's profit over people. It's not about people, how they're being affected or how they feel. It's about the money. And that's my stand on that.
Thank you. That's a lot, and a lot to digest. Just the human cost of this is so sobering, and it was very interesting watching the film. And I commented to Heather before we started off that there was a map of the wood pellet facilities in the film that Derb Carter put up, and I was struck at that and the forest disturbance map he put up and how it mirrored the longleaf pine destruction, but also how it almost exactly mirrors the Dogwood Alliance map of environmental justice communities. And what you start to see in the Southeast, or what, it was kind of an aha moment for me, was just how sort of systematically abused this region is, and the people in these regions. So it's really important. We have two hands that are raised. We had Bonnie Monteleone. Bonnie, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I would be delighted to. Could someone address the loss of soil when we clear cut as well, and the fact that the soil also takes up CO2? Can somebody address that?
Yeah, this is John. That's a very good point, Bonnie. The erosion of soil is, really dramatic in some of the areas, particularly in the lowland hardwood areas, because the cover is gone, the root systems are not functioning, and so they can wash off into local streams and cause a lot of sedimentation problems, and then that will cascade into problems with aquatic wildlife. Often the saddest cases are mollusks. Freshwater mollusks have been really decimated over the years, and this will simply increase that kind of thing. And as well, removing topsoil, and that takes many decades or hundreds of years to develop, and making the soil less productive and putting more sediment loads. And that is a very significant point, and something that has not really been documented or well articulated. Often what you'll see is they put up what's called a sediment fence. Sometimes it just looks like, I don't know, some plastic or something that doesn't appear to be or burlap. And often with a big storm that will blow out, and off it goes into the nearest water course. So it's a good point, and one of the many aspects of the physical impacts of wood pellets and vegetative removal.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the loss of soil carbon is not considered in the UK when they are determining biomass subsidies. So you'll often hear the industry or even decision makers in the United Kingdom or Europe talking about how biomass has to comply with strict sustainability criteria. And as part of that, they'll say things like biomass will reduce carbon by 80% or something like that. What's important to understand is that that does not include the largest streams of carbon from the biomass supply chain. So it doesn't include the loss of carbon in the soil or forests. It doesn't include what we call foregone carbon sequestration, which is the amount of carbon that would have been sequestered if the forest had been left standing. And it does not include the emissions when you actually combust the biomass at the stack. So literally the only thing that it considers when they're talking about carbon reductions as part of these sustainability criteria is the fossil fuel derived carbon from the processing and the transport of the pellets overseas.
That's mind-blowing, actually.
It really
It's just mind-blowing. Sharon Valentine has a question. Sharon, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like to make some comments. In 2008, I put my 6,000 acre farm into wetland restoration and wildlife habitat. And in doing so, we planted 1 million longleaf pine and 248 acres of lowland hardwood. So I had been through, at that time, 15 years of forest management, including an attempt to bring trees into the carbon cycle and the carbon trade, which we managed to do. It was to the point where we had actually brought in forest stewards and done a full assessment of the acreage and the value of preserving the trees for the carbon trade. And got it to the point where it looked like it would be marketable in the carbon market until the conservation restoration program required a 100-year lease. And most farmers know they're not going to live that long. So I understand the great frustration. The only way I was able to save those trees, many of them, 100 years old, was to put it in a restoration program where it could not be touched. I think carbon trade in time will be a chance to preserve the trees. But in the meantime, we are fighting a $60 billion industry in this state. It is extremely frustrating. And I so relate to your speaker. We are living in Wilmington, but we are suffering with methyl bromide emissions and phosphine gas, which has been added to the list, in order to fumigate logs. And I think we're going to really have to address some type of regulation with the industry. We have got to go to the mat on this because, and as a full industry regulatory request, because right now there is no regulation. We could have done anything we wanted with the trees. Most of our foresters we found and people who were in forestry really did try to manage their forests. And I am completely aware of how land is sold. Georgia Pacific did that, put thousands of acres in this state up for sale, and here comes the chipping industry, to get those short-term 10-year marketable pine trees in there and come in, then harvest them. They chip them, and that land is just left to ruin. So, that is my experience, and I wanted to share it with you because I so support what you're trying to do and urge you to look at it as a holistic problem that is really a $60 billion industry that we're going to have to address, as citizens and constituents here in North Carolina.
Thank you so much for that. That's also a lot to take in, and I think I speak for many in the chat here. Elizabeth posed this question, and it's how can we help? What can people do to help? It's hard when you hear these stories and you think you're up against a $60 billion industry. What can be done to help preserve forests and wetlands and biodiversity and make things better for people who are living in just miserable circumstances with noise and pollution and dust?
Virginia, can I speak a moment? I say to her, let your voice be heard. When you know something that is going on, a rally, whatever, get involved. Get your neighbors involved. You know, anybody that you can get involved, get them involved. We were hoping to have a statewide rally somewhere around September the 13th, but, you know, with COVID right now, we don't know for sure, you know, if it can come to fruition. But in the meantime, I use this expression when we beat the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We talked about David and Goliath, and who would thought that David could kill Goliath, but he did with one slingshot and a rock. So if enough of us keep banding together and keep making noise, enough noise, calling out your governor, calling out your representatives, and let them know that, you know, they sing that song when they want to be elected, they, you know, my constituents this and my constituents that, and then when they get up to Raleigh or DC, whatever position they're running for, sometimes they seem to forget their constituents, but we have to let them know that it's more of us than it is them. And you just have to fight. You know, you get tired, sometimes you get frustrated, but, you know, you can't give up. And that's what I guess they're hoping that we would do, is to give up. I've been in a fight for years and I'm still fighting, and I will continue to fight as long as I'm able to do so. So I encourage you. We talk to the younger generation and we're trying to get them involved because they're our future. So, you know, educate them. And if it's something that you need to know that you don't know, get in touch with somebody that you feel like there's enough organizations that if you go online, you know, you can get in touch with somebody that can educate you on the things that are going on. And my thing is just stay, you know, just keep fighting. Don't give up, keep fighting. You know, the war is not over. You know, we can still win. So that's my advice to anybody is, you know, not to give up, just keep fighting and just, like I say, educate yourself and get as many people as you know, family members, friends, because we all breathe the same air. And it doesn't matter what organization you've affiliated with. We're all here fighting for the same cause. So when we band together, like I said, it's more of us than it is them. And that's my spiel to you, is to keep fighting, don't give up, even though, you know, it looks like, you know, you can't win. But you don't know it until the end comes. So that would be my spiel to you.
Right.
I agree completely with Belinda and also Sharon's comment as well about the importance of elections in North Carolina DEQ and the EMC. Education, as Belinda said, is really important. I mean, Virginia said at the beginning of this that she's coming to this relatively new and was shocked by the information she saw and burned. I hear that a lot, even with people like Virginia who are very aware of issues either in their state or their country that have to do with biodiversity, carbon, climate change, whatever it happens to be. Even people that are very aware may not be aware of this issue. And it's because the industry has exploded so quickly and so rapidly in the past 10 or 15 years, from nothing to what it is now, and it's continuing to increase. I spoke with a reporter a couple of days ago, Belinda did as well, from the UK, who writes on climate change and didn't know anything about this industry, despite the UK being the largest importer and burner of wood pellets in the world. And so education and having your voice heard, I think, are still very important to make sure people are aware of this industry. And it is a relatively easy industry to greenwash, especially when you are a company that has a lot of money to spend on PR. and you're up against individuals like Belinda and nonprofit organizations that don't necessarily have as much resources to counter that. So we need to have this groundswelling of voices in opposition. And I think this is very important where we're going right now. I'm not sure, I don't think everyone on this call is in North Carolina. I think there are people from elsewhere as well, but there's going to be an International Day of Action in opposition to the biomass industry. I believe it's on October 21st of this year. And so there's a chance to kind of get plugged in. I think that's going to be a big kind of social media push, and there's going to be potentially action events happening throughout the world, including potentially in North Carolina. There's kind of to be determined on that, but that's an opportunity to potentially plug in some more on this issue. And then I would just say, telling your, as Belinda said, your governor, your state agencies that are supposed to be regulating these industries to make sure they are doing, if there's a pellet mill in your state and it's there, at the very least, they need to be doing everything within their power and within their discretion to make it as safe and as clean as possible. Not to mention, you know, not allowing or increasing pellet operations in your state. It's also really important on a federal level right now. Currently, the wood pellet harvesting that's happening in North Carolina and throughout the Southeast is driven almost exclusively by those subsidies in Europe. However, as the US actually moves towards actually doing something about climate change, whether that's through legislation or policy or whatever it happens to mean, there is a threat that the US will follow in the footsteps of Europe and deem biomass to be carbon neutral. And then that would only unleash a massive new market in the US that would increase not only the wood pellet harvesting, but actual combustion of biomass here in the US. So it's important to be telling your state representatives, your senators, and the administration that biomass is not the way we should be going.
And also, Heather, to add to that, you know, we're not only fighting over here. I was on a roundtable call with people from Turkey, from British Columbia just last week. They're fighting it because they're paying those taxes and you know, they're not benefited from it. On Monday, I had two gentlemen from the Netherlands that was here from the Denmark radio news to do a story on the wood pellet plant. So not only are we fighting over here, but they're fighting over there too. And I feel like, you know, with all the fighting that's going on in both places, something has to happen, and it has to be a positive thing. That's my thought. And I'm claiming a positive. You know, we have to look as if it's already done rather than, you know, not thinking that we, you know, we can't defeat this or, you know, we can't stop this. We have to, you know, we have to keep fighting as if, you know, we're winning in the game, and I believe we will come out victorious.
It's interesting, as Heather pointed out, I'm coming at this as a newcomer, and watching the film, one of the things that struck me was, is it Lance, Michigan? Where they have a biomass plant, but it's incinerating tires and creosote-soaked railroad ties. Is that the sort of thing that we have going on here in North Carolina as well, or are the wood pellet plants here just mostly straightforward wood pellet? It was kind of alarming to me to think that tires were being marketed as biomass.
That's one of those like amorphous terms that can mean many things. Now, burning tires, burning treated wood, those things are also considered renewable in some states, renewable portfolio standards and things like that, which is why you get the generation facilities like you see in Lance, Michigan. I don't know the current status of it, but there are two facilities in North Carolina that also burn a combination of coal, oil, and treated wood, including creosote treated wood. And they have a very problematic air pollution associated with burning that treated materials. One of my colleagues actually worked on that. I did not, so I don't have the most up-to-date information about it, but I could find out more and share it. Or others on this call might actually know. It was the CPI facility in Roxborough explicitly that I'm talking about. So that does happen as well, kind of throughout the United States. You have those types of facilities, and they are considered biomass facilities. when that film, I believe, when it talks about biomass power generation in the UK, in particular Drax, what they're referring to there is solely the combustion of wood pellets, which come from the virgin wood, so the untreated wood that makes the wood pellets.
Thank you. Jack Sproul has his hand up. Jack, would you like to unmute yourself?
Okay. A follow-up question for Heather regarding things that both Belinda and Sharon touched on, and that's the issue of cumulative environmental impact. I don't expect you to disclose any strategies you might be working on. That being said, by any reasonable standard, the cumulative environmental impact by, for example, Enviva in our state is not being considered. What I call the silo air permit issues related to the wood pellet plants, not even to emissions from the Enviva domes at the Port of Wilmington is being considered in the matter. And I know that, Heather, you brought action in federal court recently about Clean Water Act issue in Lumberton. But if we can't get the state of North Carolina to one way or the other start considering cumulative environmental impact, is there any hope? Again, don't share any secrets. Is there any hope that in federal court action could be brought against the state for failing to meet its delegated authority under the Federal Environmental FEMA Management Act?
Yeah, it is a loaded question, Jack. Let's see. You know, there are each pellet mill. What I would say is a case-by-case situation that you have to take. As Jack identified, cumulative impacts are a big problem with industrial pollution, but with these pellet mills, because of where they are located and because of the fact that these communities there was a study that found that wood pellet manufacturing facilities in the Southeast US are 50% more likely to be in low-income communities of color. And those communities are already burdened by other sources of pollution. Now, Title VI requires these state agencies to consider and address cumulative impacts in their permitting decisions. And we have seen, I think, very consistently that state agencies are not doing that. What they will do is they will take a look at, say, the demographic information for the area, maybe provide that information to the community, and then otherwise wash their hands of it and think that, you know, they don't actually need to do anything about those cumulative impacts. And I would say that a lot of people disagree with their reading of their requirements under Title VI. Now, I hope with the new administration and the stated goals of the Biden administration to consider equity and address environmental injustices, I would hope that they will start doing a better job in terms of EPA's enforcement of Title VI and the requirements of these state agencies. It gets a little bit more complicated in terms of what could actually be done against a state. There are different mechanisms you can use to try to bring a Title VI complaint against a state or against a company. But again, those are kind of case by case. Otherwise, what we've been left with, at least for the past couple of years, is to look at individual pellet mills and investigate whether there are environmental infractions occurring, whether that is air pollution or water pollution, or, you know, and look into the state agency's permitting of those facilities and see if there are errors, clear errors that are being made, again, outside of the cumulative impact issue that I just talked about in terms of air pollution and the authority under state air quality laws. You know, are there clear violations? And we've had some opportunities in the past, the Enviva facility in Richmond County, North Carolina, and Hamlet. You know, we brought a challenge against the state agency back in, I think, 2018 against their issuance of that permit in violation of the Clean Air Act. And as Jack referenced, we are currently in litigation right now in federal court against a pellet company that is building a new pellet mill in Lumberton, North Carolina. And even before the pellet mill has started operating, we've already identified violations of the Clean Water Act for water pollution that is making its way into the Lumber River, which is a state and federal natural and scenic river. So yeah, I think that's probably what I could say on that.
Okay, that's great. I'm trying to go through the chat here. We have a lot of comments, a lot of thank yous. Let me go back a little bit. Michaela is saying to Belinda, I felt your words. Thank you for what you shared. So powerful and important. She also includes a resource regarding carbon markets in the chat, and we'll be sending along all the links that were posted in the chat along with the video recording. Heather says thank you to Sharon so much for sharing your experience, which is really interesting, quite sobering. Bonnie is saying thank you, John, for sharing about the soul, Belinda for bringing it home, and Sharon for your personal efforts and experience. Sharon is saying that each and every election is important and that NCDEQ, the EMC, and our elected officials must be held accountable. One vote trumps $1 in campaign contributions. Sarah Hollis says, yes, thank you, Belinda. Folks can find North Carolina Representative's contact information here, a link. Sharon says that don't forget that forestry is administered in the Department of Agriculture and should be included in a call for responsibility. Funding for grants that create advocacy might be found in the legislation reducing carbon and climate change. And I think that's about it for the chat. Anyone else have any questions or comments or parting insights? We're just about at 1 o'clock. I guess not. I feel like we have just scratched the surface of this, and it's so alarming and sobering, and it still feels so concealed despite being such a massive industry with such a massive impact. It's hidden behind these beauty screens of trees, a little bit of a Potemkin beauty screen that we think there's an unbroken forest behind it, but it's not there and it's disappearing rapidly. So this has been quite illuminating to me on a personal level and a professional level, and I hope it has been equally illuminating for some of you all. Thank you all so much for bringing your knowledge and expertise and passion to this fight and just to this event today. It means a lot. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing and learning more from each of you.
Thank you, Virginia, for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Okay.
Thanks for the invite. I enjoyed. Hey, Jack, how are you?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.